Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the UN General Assembly delivers a stinging rebuke to Britain in voting overwhelmingly to back a resolution demanding that it return the disputed Chagos Islands to Mauritius within 6 months. Also, fighting corruption and reviving South Africa's economy are amongst the main challenges facing President Cyril Ramaphosa after being re-elected by Parliament earlier on Wednesday. And one of Africa's most famous authors, Kenyan Binyavanga Wainaina, has died, aged 48. A renowned gay rights activist, he came out in 2014 saying that it was because of his right to dignity. But first, the UN General Assembly voted overwhelmingly on Wednesday to back African demands that Britain cede the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. 116 countries backed a non-binding resolution urging the end of what was dubbed the colonial administration of the archipelago by the UK and calls for the return of Mauritian sovereignty within 6 months. The fate of the islands has been a long-running saga. Britain separated them from Mauritius in 1965 and set up a joint military base with the US on the largest island of Diego Garcia. Between 1968 and 1973, the entire population, about 2,000 islanders, were kicked out and resettled. Some compensation was awarded to some Chagosians in 1982, but they and their descendants continue to battle for the right of return. Earlier, I spoke to Milan Metaben, Mauritius's former ambassador to the UN, and asked him what happens now, as the UK is not obligated to do anything in light of the non-binding UN resolution.
Theoretically, the resolution is not binding, but we have an advisory opinion given by the World Court, which is the highest judicial authority on matters of international law. And Mauritius has always argued for the last 50 years that the excision of the Chagos Islands prior to independence was a breach of international law. So we now have an opinion of the highest judicial organ of the United Nations, and today the support of 116 members of the United Nations supporting our view that the excision was unlawful. So we hope that Britain, which has always championed the rule of law across the world, will not ignore the views of the World Court and the views of the states as expressed at the United Nations today, and that Britain will negotiate in good faith with Mauritius so that Mauritius can assert its sovereignty over the Chagos.
Now, there's been a lot of legal back and forth over sovereignty over the islands over the years. What, for you, are the biggest issues at the heart of the dispute between the UK and Mauritius?
Well, the main issue has been that of sovereignty. Because, as I said, we believe that the excision was unlawful, but there was also a humanitarian issue because Britain forcibly expelled the Chagosians, the Mauritian nationals of Chagosian origin who lived on that island, and we hope that with the recognition of Mauritian sovereignty over the archipelago, Mauritian nationals, including those who are of Chagosian origin, will have the right of movement over the whole of Mauritian territory, including the Chagos archipelago.
In other news, Cyril Ramaphosa has been re-elected as president by South African lawmakers in the wake of the ANC ruling party's victory in this month's general election. The swearing-in of his deputy, though, David Mabuso, has been pushed back over graft allegations that he denies. Laurent Berstecker has more.
Gearing up for his first full presidential term, Cyril Ramaphosa was given a standing ovation after he was re-elected by Parliament on Wednesday. South African lawmakers were holding their first session since the May 8th elections, which saw the ruling ANC party win with over 57% of votes. It was the slimmest majority for the African National Congress since the end of apartheid 25 years ago, a sign that some voters have become disillusioned with the endemic corruption plaguing the party. Cyril Ramaphosa, who will be sworn in on Saturday, had vowed to tackle this long-standing issue during his campaign.
At national level, provincial level, local government level, we must end corruption. And comrades, we are going to end corruption.
Yet restoring public trust in the ANC is likely to be an uphill battle for Ramaphosa. The president announced Wednesday that his influential deputy, David Mabuza, who was implicated in a string of corruption scandals, would delay taking his oath as lawmaker, a move which Ramaphosa hopes will be seen as a statement of intent that he means to keep his campaign promises.
Look now at News in Brief. South Africa has decided to extradite a former Mozambican finance minister wanted on graft charges back to his homeland. The US also wanted Manuel Chang over an alleged $2 billion fraud and money laundering scheme. And Washington said that it is disappointed that the South African Justice Ministry sided with Mozambique. Chang was arrested in December in South Africa at the request of the US. Maputo accuses him of taking about $17 million in kickbacks when he was head of the Treasury between 2005 and 2015. At least 6 people were killed in a suicide car bombing in Mogadishu. Extremist group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for the explosion, which happened at a security checkpoint near the presidential palace in the capital. The militants frequently target the compound in their guerrilla war against weak central authorities. And at least 34 people were killed in an attack by the armed 3R group in Central African Republic. Militants reportedly attacked several villages in the northwest region of Powau on Tuesday in retaliation over the killing of an ethnic Pearl. The government's demanded that the group's leader, Cede, hand over those responsible for the killing or face a crackdown. The bloodshed's the most deadly since a peace deal with armed groups was signed in February, aimed at bringing stability to the turbulent country. Killings coincided with the news of the murder of a 77-year-old French-Spanish nun in the village of Nola in the southwest. Now, one of Africa's most famous authors, Kenyan Binyavanga Wainaina, has died, aged 48. The renowned gay rights activist was named in 2014 as one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people. He came out 5 years ago, as he said, to help preserve his dignity. Nicholas Chemin tells us more.
It's a great loss for the African continent's literary world. Kenyan author Binyavanga Wainaina has died aged 48. He was living with HIV. In 2014, he came out as a homosexual just as anti-gay legislation was passed in Nigeria, a country he dearly loved.
I see my coming out as an intervention in a moment in time. An intervention that was like, if I have to live accountably here, I don't want my brothers and sisters to be dying and being beaten in Nigeria. And then I'm kind of quiet, I'm making loud noises and saying they, it's they, oh yeah, those people who are gay, I'm feeling for them. I just felt that that intervention was necessary. But for example, I don't sit in my library reading gay books only.
Wainaina was famous for his essay ironically titled How to Write About Africa, a lesson for would-be journalists. Here are just 3 of his recommendations.
These are the taboo subjects: ordinary domestic scenes, love between Africans, mention of school-going children who are not suffering from yaws or Ebola fever, or female genital mutilation. Among your characters, you must always include the starving African, who wanders the refugee camp nearly naked and waits for the benevolence of the West. Never ever say anything negative about an elephant or a gorilla. Elephants may attack people's property, destroy their crops, and even kill them. Always take the side of the elephant.
His acclaimed memoirs were titled One Day I Will Write About This Place. In it, he says he was always addicted to reading. The gay rights activist has died just 2 days before a High Court ruling in Kenya that will decide if gay sex remains illegal in the country.
Wise words from Wainaina there. Well, that is, though, all we have time for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.